Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and joining us today. My name is Alex. I'm the Director of Programs and Community Engagement over at the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies, APAICS. And I'm really excited today to have our new webinar series, the Emerging Professionals Virtual Learning Series, where we're kind of bringing the professional development that we normally would have brought to our congressional interns over the summer and turning it kind of into a webinar series. And so through this series, we're kind of exposing people to maybe congressional careers, giving you different professional or technical skills that you need to succeed in the workplace. So I'm really excited to kick it off today with our panelists and our webinar called Pathways to Working in Congress. Our moderator today is Anthony Reyes, who is the Congressional Asian Pacific American Staff Association Senate Vice President, also known as CAPASSO. And he's going to be moderating our panel where we have some senior AAPI Hill staffers today to kind of share their best advice, tips, tricks, and really how they got to where they are today to kind of demystify the process of what it's like to work on Capitol Hill, how to get on Capitol Hill, and to really just share their experiences with all of us here today. So with that, before I kick it over to Anthony, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're tuning in on Zoom and you have a question, feel free to write your questions right into the chat box. If you're tuning in on Facebook Live, feel free to drop a question in the comment section. We're going to reserve a little bit of time at the end to get to those. And hope you all enjoy the discussion. Thanks for tuning in. And Anthony.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Reyes. I am the one of two Senate Vice Presidents for the Congressional Asian Pacific American Staff Association. Thank you, APAICS, for having us all be a part of this important discussion. And I also want to thank our esteemed panelists. As a junior staffer, I could say that all three of them have very admirable careers that in public service and in government that I reach for personally. So I'm really excited to learn more about what they have to say. Another quick housekeeping item I wanted to mention before we all begin with sort of introductions is that the comments that we're going to be making today are reflections of our personal opinions and sort of our personal perspectives that as the way we see it as staffers on Capitol Hill, and not necessarily reflections of the members of Congress that we work for, or the offices that those members occupy. So with that said, we can kind of just kick it off with introductions, and I'll kind of go alphabetical with first names. So if we could start with Lila. From Senator Tim Scott's office. Lila?
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Anthony. Hi, my name is Lila. I'm a policy advisor for Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Really excited to be here today. I know that, when I was a young staffer, I'm half Korean, half Puerto Rican, so I get to straddle two very culturally rich worlds. And when I was just a young staffer over on the House side, CAPASSO and others were actually a great haven for both networking and talking with people and trying to find mentors who helped guide me along my path. So I'll just kind of kick off with that plug for you all. But that being said, so I handle banking policy, I handle a good chunk of economic policy for the senator, including banking issues, financial services, housing, trade, defense, foreign relations, as well as small business for the senator. So now has just been a really interesting time for all of those issues, because we just find ourselves in an unforeseen circumstance, and one that's very important, especially for a state like South Carolina, where we have so many constituents that rely on manufacturing and trade. We see this economic downturn as affecting a lot of those folks. So we've been laser focused on how do we put policies in place that help those individuals. So I've been very excited, been with the senator for going on 2 years now. And before that was over on the House side of the Ways and Means Committee, and then worked for Chairman Ed Royce on his foreign affairs committee.
Great, awesome. Mike?
Hey everyone, thanks again for putting this together. I'll be super brief since I know that there are lots of questions to go through. My name is Mike Inakai. I'm Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii's Communications Director, so I manage our communications team and sort of every single aspect of communications from our office. So, whether it's media relations or social media, speech writing, or our website, all ways of sort of communicating with constituents and the media to make sure our message about the work that we've been doing in the Senate gets out. So I'll sort of just leave it there since I know I have lots of questions going on. So give back to you guys.
Great. Sonali?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sonali Desai. I am currently Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Judy Chu from Los Angeles, California. As Chief of Staff, I kind of do a little bit of everything. And it's kind of like one of those roles where if someone doesn't have the answer, they turn to you. So it's a really exciting position to be in, because you learn how to manage effectively. You learn about press, you learn about, obviously the policy strategy, you learn about member-to-member interactions, and the campaign side of things. So it's kind of just one of those roles where you dabble in a little bit of everything, and you are the members, typically like their first call when they're looking to talk about an issue or figure out how to handle something. So that's the role I serve, and I've been on the Hill for about 10 years now, and started as a staff assistant. So yeah, and like Michael said, I know there's going to be much discussion, so I'll stop there. But thank you for having us.
Great. That's awesome. So the first question, and I think this is something sort of reflected in the fact that a lot of folks that look like us and have perspectives that we come from aren't represented on Capitol Hill. I know for one, as a kid growing up, in a Filipino community in Miami, one of very few, not a lot of people tap me on the shoulder and ask me, hey, you should really get into public service and public policy. My mom wanted me to be a nurse, and she's still or a doctor, kind of still holding out. So I'd love your guys' thoughts. Did you guys sort of see yourselves coming into Capitol Hill and to public service? And can you kind of talk about what prompted you to sort of begin the trajectory that you're on now and so forth? Yeah, we could start with Lila.
Yeah, no, I actually never in a million years thought I was going to work on Capitol Hill. I remember I've always loved international policy. I actually wanted to be a medieval historian, as weird as that is. So deviated significantly from that path. But my mom also still holds out that I will become a doctor. That was definitely not going to happen. I admire people who can do that much school. But I think I always had an interest in politics and in international affairs. And actually, as my went into my later undergrad years, I saw a lot of friends who went to Capitol Hill back when the House had a page system, and people went to become Senate pages. And I got exposure to that, but I just thought to myself, my family was not politically connected. That door is just not a door that's open to me, and so I just kind of pushed back against the idea that I would be qualified to work on Capitol Hill. And then I eventually moved to DC and got involved in the nonprofit advocacy side of things, working on Middle East policy, and ended up interacting with folks on the Hill. And I realized this is such a vibrant community that can be very welcoming, and was able to build out a network and actually ended up leaving my job and started as an intern because I just wanted to be on Capitol Hill so badly because I fell in love with it, and just worked my way up the food chain there. Much like Sonali, I started as a staff associate on the Foreign Affairs Committee and just worked my way up and really it's truly just such a vibrant atmosphere. And like I said at the very beginning, organizations like CAPASSO and others were just so important to helping me push me along that path and connecting with people who knew of job openings or who knew of hey, maybe you connect with this person and they can kind of help you get a better sense of this new policy area you're working on. So very much did not start off school or my life thinking I was going to work in Capitol Hill, and quite frankly, again, really thought that I was unqualified to work on Capitol Hill. And then through the right people and networks, really got to know what Capitol Hill was and had a passion for it. So absolutely.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to basically what both of you guys just said. I grew up in a Filipino community out in LA. Didn't know anyone who's doing this kind of work. When I was growing up, my parents wanted me to be a doctor or a nurse, particularly a nurse for Filipinos. So, and this was not something that I thought about when I was a kid. I think it was in college when you first sort of take poli-sci classes and you start becoming more interested in this. I was a business major in college. So this sort of didn't fall within that path. And even sort of while I was taking poli-sci classes midway through college, I sort of thought I would sort of switch majors, but I thought, that's not really practical. Lots of my parents and lots of friends thought, didn't really see a career there. And it was until I graduated from college and thought, what am I going to do with my life? I sort of really wanted to get to DC. And what I did was I ended up taking an unpaid internship here. And it was tough because you don't have a lot of money. You're very far away from home. I had a little bit of money saved up from when I had worked all throughout high school and college. And sort of thought to myself, I'll spend a few months here, figure out if I like it, and if I don't, and if I do, that's great. You know, maybe I can stay out here forever, but if not, I'll just go back home, and it'll be a good experience. Turns out I really enjoyed it. It was something that I wanted to do, and so I made an effort to stay here, and it was because of groups like CAPASSO, because I found great friends within the Filipino American community who I consider both friends and mentors who have guided me throughout my time here, who have told me who to talk to, you know, sent my resume to lots of their friends and colleagues. I was sort of able to build a career before, you know, Senator Schatz's office. I was working for Senator Boxer of California, and had, you know, developed great relationships with people in DC and California who have, throughout my entire career, have helped me along the way. So not a career path that I had envisioned years ago, but I'm certainly glad I took some of these risks, especially considering that, you know, no one I knew in my community had done this before.
Great. Sonali? I think you need to unmute yourself, Sonali.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a small town in South Carolina, actually, Lila, upstate South Carolina called Greenwood. There was not a large and vibrant Indian community there. You know, we were one of the few Indian families in our town, and my family was not, you know, very politically engaged, but I kind of caught some sort of bug. I think in middle school, high school, I had a lot of teachers, one teacher in particular who was very supportive of my interest in, you know, politics and policy. And she and I actually started our like Young Democrats group in our small little rural town of South Carolina. So I always had an interest, and I kind of always knew that I wanted to do something around this field, but you don't really know what. I personally didn't really know what. I didn't know what the opportunities were. So after I got to college, I made it a point to intern in Washington, D.C. So I did that for 2 summers, unpaid internships, just like Michael. And I, you know, kind of used those as a launching pad. And I figured out that I did an internship in the nonprofit sector, and then I did 2 internships on the Hill. And then when I was on the Hill, it just all clicked. You know, I thought, this is where I see myself. I get along with these people. You know, I kind of admired everyone that I worked with. So after that, I had tunnel vision, and I just knew that after I graduate, I'm gonna make it here somehow. I'll figure it out. But the time I graduated was 2011. So it was a really tough time for Democrats specifically, because we had just lost the House. So, you know, I came up here without a job after I graduated, stayed with my cousin, knocked on, I don't know if people do this anymore, but just went door to door physically to offices and handed out like copies of my resume. And that's kind of how it worked for me. It took me a few months, but what made the difference was that at one of those offices I stopped by, the staff assistant was there, and then we ended up chatting for a while, and she didn't know of any open positions or anything like that. But we had a really good conversation. And then, you know, I think like 5 weeks later, she emailed me and said, hey, I actually just got promoted. You should come and interview for my position. So that was really the breakthrough that I had. And then I started working for Mel Watt, who represented the 12th District of North Carolina. And then that got me into this world. So yeah, I just had tunnel vision, basically.
Great. I remember when I first started as an intern on the Senate side in 2014, somebody kind of told me an old adage where if you look at the Capitol building, I guess like right behind you, if you feel a little bit different or you get goosebumps, you know, that's when you know that it might be a place for you to work. But also if you kind of become monotonous, then you might want to move on. But I'm far away from that, as I'm sure many of us are as well. So based on what you guys, you know, some of the comments you guys shared, all very pointed and helpful advice. You know, right now, particularly living, you know, under quarantine and, you know, not being able to have face-to-face discussions and, you know, drop off our resumes and have coffees with people and, you know, other important networking opportunities like that. What do you think there are some ways that young folks who might be interested in interning or might be recent graduates now that some ways that they can get their foot in the door. I know that unpaid internships, have kind of lapsed. I mean, in terms of the cycle, but it's also moving on to paid internships and things like that. But what do you think are some ways where, if I'm a young person, I can kind of work to build a network or communicate with people with jobs that I may one day want to have? And whoever feels like they might have some advice immediately, whoever wants to go.
I can go. Yeah, I definitely don't want to sugarcoat it, because this is a very difficult situation that we are in. And I do think, like you said, it's really difficult if you are trying to, explore opportunities and learn and meet people. This environment just really isn't that conducive to it. But I will say that should not prevent you from reaching out to people that you think would be helpful. I know I myself have done, virtual coffees and Zooms with people. And I know others on our staff have as well. So people are still willing to talk and to meet with you. Offices are still hiring, and things are still happening. So don't feel discouraged from reaching out. It might take you a few follow-up emails to, get the coffee that you want to have, or get the virtual coffee that you want to have scheduled, but don't be discouraged by that. There's also, campaigns and things happening. I think there's a lot of opportunities to engage on that side. So yeah, I would encourage you to find ways to do that, and definitely don't feel discouraged for reaching out.
Yeah, I would definitely just build on that. Actually, in some ways, I think that the current environment can help students and recent graduates, because a lot of times, Sonali, as a chief, you definitely know more about this than I do, but I remember when we're looking at interns, or we're looking to hire staff assistants within our office, and other offices I've been in, there's always this value placed on, can you start immediately? Are you in Washington, D.C.? And interestingly enough, kind of with the pandemic situation, a lot of offices are work from home. I mean, I know some friends who, a good chunk of our office is from South Carolina. So those folks have, when we had the extended work from home periods, they were working from their homes in South Carolina. I have other friends, who their families live in California, and their offices have very liberal policies, and they're working from their parents' house. And things like that can actually be a possible door opening for staffers who maybe can't afford to, or people who want to become staffers and who can't afford to come to Washington and just, do a job search for a couple of months. They can do a lot of this virtually from wherever their financial means are, and where they can be comfortable with. You might have to come to DC to do your onboarding, or maybe you could do that in a district office or a state office. So I think that it kind of presents some opportunities for innovation, especially for people who don't necessarily have the financial capital to just come here and try and job search. I think that this is, trying to find, I'm a silver linings kind of person. If we're trying to find a silver lining, I think that that's one of them. And Sonali's absolutely right. Just you have to reach out to people, use things like LinkedIn, because we're all kind of trapped in the same place. Everyone's somewhere near their home. So you have that opportunity to connect with people, because we just we're attached to our computers and we're looking at our inboxes. So it does present its opportunity in that way. You don't have to leave the comfort of your home to go to a Dunkin' Donuts in Longworth basement. So.
I'm just going to I agree with everything that they both have said about sort of reaching out to folks. I think that's sort of the best way of connecting with people on the Hill. One plug I do want to give out for folks, I know lots of people, when we think about working on the Hill, and this was the case with me, is like you always want to get into policy, right? You sort of get into public service, work on the Hill, because you feel like you want to make a difference. You want to write legislation. You want to be part of this legislative push from a particular member, a particular ideology. I do want to make a plug for communications. It's not something that I sort of came onto the Hill wanting to do. I really wanted to do policy. I was an LC with Senator Boxer's office for a year, realized I didn't really like it. It wasn't a good fit in terms of, the pace was way too slow for me. I thought it was, especially if you're working on, a few issues, sometimes those issues don't come up. And so you're sort of languishing, and, especially as an LC. And so I sort of took this risk in doing press and sort of never looked back. It's a great opportunity for folks who want to work on the Hill, who want to work on the policies they care about. You sort of work on lots of different issues and not any specific ones. So, you sort of get the best of both worlds in terms of policy and comms. And there aren't that many Asian Americans who are sort of in this space. When I look around in RCD's meetings, there are a few, and lots of them are minorities, but there aren't that many who sort of view press as an option when they come on the Hill. And I think for lots of people who are looking for a job, want the foot in the door and coming in, like I would say, consider everything, right? Like, yes, you want to work on policy, and that's great, and maybe you can get there. But I would not turn down a job in scheduling, a job in press, a job in sort of any other sort of aspect of the Hill. When you're coming in at such a, as a junior staffer, or, as an intern, judging from my experience, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I sort of knew I wanted to do policy, but sort of didn't explore other areas. And it wasn't until I did that I realized, like, this is something that's a better fit for me. So I say, for folks who are looking for a job, just consider all the options that are available on the Hill.
Great, that's awesome. Yeah, I think particularly, getting that foot in the door, adaptability is a really important word that I remember when I was an intern, a lot of my mentors kind of hit me over the head with and sort of said, being a utility player and open to a lot of opportunities. With that said, the three of you guys come from some of the most diverse offices on Capitol Hill. I know Senator Scott's office is quite diverse, and your chief actually leads a lot of efforts on the diversity side throughout the Senate. Congresswoman Chu, of course, has been an advocate for diversity on the Hill, and Senator Schatz as well. Can you guys sort of talk about, what you think might be both challenges and opportunities for diversity on Capitol Hill, particularly as, within even our careers and our lifetimes, we've seen it continually grow in diversity in ways that we as a community and more senior folks can help more junior folks kind of build diversity on Capitol Hill?
Sure, I can go. It's kind of, we're in this moment now where I think lots of offices are beginning to value diversity. I'm very lucky in my office for many years since it's actually sort of started. We've been a majority minority office, but that's not the case when I step out of the office, right? There are lots of offices where they don't have any diverse voices there. So I think it's a really good opportunity now. I think people are realizing that they contribute to an office in a way that sort of having a non-diverse office would. So I would say obviously there are lots of offices who are encouraging a more diverse staff. So I think now is a really good opportunity to get in the door. But there are lots of groups like CAPASSO and other groups. And when I was an intern, it was for Javier Becerra, who represented Eagle Rock in LA, which is my hometown. And the folks in that office were all involved with the Hispanic Staff Association. And so my first sort of entry into the staff associations was actually with CHASA. And they were such a great help to me in helping me get interviews and getting jobs. So I would sort of, lean into some of these staff associations who are doing such great work in making these jobs known and sort of guiding you throughout the way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'll speak for my office. Anthony, as you mentioned, the senator and our chief, Jennifer, just had a vision for kind of how they wanted their staff, because they value individuals for the perspectives that they bring. We have folks on our staff who come from an entire political spectrum, and that helps breed a lot of diversity, not only of staff, but of thinking, of how to approach problems, how to problem solve, how to message. And it really helps to have a very vibrant atmosphere where you can constantly, in our old ledge pit, one person would kind of say something and everyone kind of pops up like little groundhogs, and it starts this whole conversation that can span, our personal experiences, how we might view legislative policy, and helps really build a robust dialogue around problem solving. Because at the end of the day, the problems that Congress is trying to solve are very complex, and they affect everyone in the United States, and not everyone is a carbon copy of the next person. They're diverse problems, and they deserve diverse solutions. And so I think it's such an asset, and I'm very lucky to be in an environment that values that and explores that and really just espouses that policy. I would say something I'm very lucky to have. Not all of my offices that I've worked in have been like that, or have had a high number of diverse staffers. And I think when you kind of look around, someone like me, again, half Korean, half Puerto Rican, kind of looking around, and you want to look towards mentors. You kind of want to look towards people who come from your cultural background, because you want to have a commonality with them. And it's harder to find that. And I think things like CAPASSO and other organizations have been such a leader because I think they actually punch above their weight, right? They have vibrant voices, they do things like this, and they really make their presence known. And I think that's so helpful to so many diverse and minority staffers who want to know that they have a place in this ecosystem and want to do something. And when you find, you're lucky enough to have an office that also mirrors that, it really helps someone like me who wants to just achieve and feels very welcome for expressing my opinions.
Great. And Sonali.
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, I mean, I started working, like I said, in 2011, and I actually didn't know about any of the staff associations. I didn't know about APAICS, CAPASSO, CASASA, and looking back, I think that would have been really, really helpful to me. So congratulations to everyone who's viewing it and who has already found these resources. Like everyone said, please tap into them. But yeah, I really didn't know that these resources existed. I just knew, oh, there's some, there are API staffers on the Hill. I see them in the hallway sometimes, it'd be nice if we could talk. But when I joined Congresswoman Judy Chu's office as a legislative assistant, her team was very involved in these staff associations and supporting them and encouraging staff to participate in them. And that opened my eyes to the diversity that was already there on the Hill, and it's only increased since then. And I will say, we are at a time where there is intense focus on diversity from all ranks. The House has the House Democratic Diversity Initiative that has been set up and has their director, Kemba, who is there as a resource. You can send your resumes there to help get placed. And then the House Democratic Caucus actually just passed a rule this week, and that essentially says that all members should take into account or prioritize diversity, inclusion, and hiring. So, I mean, that's all things that we have not seen this entire time, in my 10 years that I've been here. So I think there's obviously a lot of work to be done, especially in senior leadership positions. That's kind of a lot of times where we see the numbers drop off. But the key is building the pipeline and getting folks in the door so they have the right skill sets and they are prepared when the senior opportunities come up. So I think these initiatives that the House has passed will make a big difference and great strides in those areas.
Great. This is sort of the last question before, because we have a couple questions incoming from the audience. We talked a lot about mentorship and networking and the importance that brings to beginning our careers on Capitol Hill. Can you kind of sort of talk about some hard skills or skills and a background that you think students and young professionals can build on now that they might want to have on their resume as they start kind of soliciting for positions and kind of looking for how to, like, just things that they might want to be getting involved in now? Particularly, I know Mike mentioned that it's an election year, and there's a lot of things that people can be doing now to kind of prepare themselves if come next season or next year that they wanted to really start kicking off their career on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I'll take first crack. Campaigns are a great way to get involved in politics. Whatever side, whatever political party you are, everyone has a campaign. Everyone has a campaign office. Campaigning is really different right now, right? We had to completely change the model for both parties in terms of what campaigning looks like and what voter outreach looks like. So then that goes to being able to have more of those virtual connections and being involved and not necessarily requiring you to physically be in the same place that you're working. Another thing is there's a lot of advocacy groups that have come out as a result of kind of the political environment and the economic environment. Those are great ways to, a friend of mine is leading a PPP information initiative. So how can we help connect minority businesses with lenders? How can they utilize the tools that are available for them to get through this economic time? She has very little political experience, but this is something that she saw within her community, and she wanted to actually enact some sort of change. And luckily she has coding skills and stuff like that. And so she used it, and she's using her social media platforms to kind of push out this information. So it's really a great time for innovation. And those are all things that you can do to sort of plug yourself into the environment and to learn about what's going on and to become an asset, because that's kind of what we do as on the policy side and even on the comms side. I actually started off in DC on the comms side. We're about how do we get access to information to people, and then how do we help them resolve their problems. So you can do a microcosm version of that, and that's a skill set you could bring to a job on Capitol Hill.
Mike?
Yeah, so I would sort of agree with that. I think campaigns are such a great way of sort of getting in this arena. One key skill set that I'm always looking for when I'm hiring is whether or not someone's a good writer. So you don't necessarily need a job to do that, but I think having good writing samples is really key. It's something that, obviously in comms is really important, but it's also critical in really any job on the Hill, is whether or not you're a very good writer. And, I would say sort of sharpen those skills, have great writing samples available, something that sort of is applicable to the job that you want. And I think, that's one skill that I think, most people sort of don't think about a whole lot. It's not something that you need a whole lot of experience doing. It's just sort of working at it. And so that would be my one skill set that I would say for folks.
Yeah, I 110 times agree with Mike on writing. That is the biggest thing I think a lot of times that we look at when we start our interview process, because it's the hardest thing to teach sometimes. Is a lot of times people are very set in their ways in how they write because they've written that way all through college and afterwards, and they've never really been given critical feedback otherwise. So that's always something that we say has to be the building block. Just because it's really, really hard to correct. So I totally agree. Hill writing is very concise. I think a lot of times people struggle with that, putting a lot of complex information into concise, digestible documents. Honestly, members don't have time a lot of times to read 20, 30-page memos going into all the bits and pieces about an issue. So the more you are able to strengthen your ability to summarize really complex arguments in a clear and concise way, the stronger your application will be. So any ways that you can practice that, I totally would encourage you to do. And even if it's just finding an issue to research and then forcing yourself to summarize everything you've learned in one page or something like that. But that's a really critical skill. And then the other thing I've seen more, through hiring is that there is a need for folks that understand digital. Even whether it's video editing or social media or things like that, those are all things that members are looking to engage even more on. There are obviously some offices that excel at that and are just so good, and the members engaged. And then there's other offices who just have a different style and are still taking baby steps into those new platforms. So I think, that is a skill set you could definitely work on. That would be an asset to a lot of Hill offices that are still figuring out how to master that.
Great, that's awesome. And a quick plug, since I am the Senate Vice President for CAPASSO, and also the three panelists joining us are advisory committee members. So, CAPASSO, just like many other organizations on Capitol Hill, work to foster young people looking to get on Capitol Hill and be part of, that pipeline with resume reviews and workshops and panels such as these. So do look to the organizations. So the first question we have from the audience, I'm just going to paraphrase it because it's a little bit lengthy. It's sort of talking about it's a question about sort of figuring out what your skill set is and what worth you're bringing to a position, basically kind of trying to figure out what your negotiables and non-negotiables are and figuring out what positions to apply for. Can you kind of talk about when you found something might be a good fit and when you applied to it and what you considered in that opportunity relative to what your background was, like when looking for jobs, what to kind of keep in mind?
I can start. I mean, I think it depends on where you are in your career. When I first started out, I felt like I needed a paycheck and I didn't really have that much experience. And I was very aware of what I was bringing into the role, which was just kind of my charisma, my limited internship experience. And looking at those things, I kind of had a good understanding of, what should I be willing to accept? Yes, I would have loved to be a legislative correspondent starting out and not start out, answering phones and making copies and all of that. But I knew that my background didn't really allow me to do that. So I think it kind of, and then if you're more experienced in your career and you have had some previous work experience, yes, of course, it's like very important to see, to think about how what you're doing connects with what you've already done, especially if you're looking to build upon that and not just pivot. So yeah, I would say most important thing is to kind of just do a self-assessment as to where you are and what your immediate needs are. Is it just, getting finding paid work? If that is it, then you probably have to let go on a few other things. But if you do have the flexibility to kind of wait it out and find the perfect fit, then that's great too.
Yeah, I'm just gonna piggyback on what you said and sort of what I said earlier in terms of if you were coming in this after college or, off an unpaid internship and you sort of just want to be on the Hill, I'm going to go back to saying, just keep an open mind. I think it's if there's a particular issue that you want to work on, and maybe you are interning and not necessarily working on that specific policy issue, I think, sit down with an LA who's in that space and talk through what their work is like. If you are interested in comms and are a staff assistant, talk with your comms director about what that's like, and sort of ask them whether or not there is, if they need any help. So if you are just starting out and you aren't entirely sure which path you want to follow, I say just be open-minded. Talk to the people who are in jobs that you sort of are slightly interested in. Learn more about them. Like myself and Milo, we didn't start where I think we are now. We started two different paths, which I think lots of people don't think can cross. But when you're first starting out, you sort of just want to get to better understand where you want to go. And so the best way to do that is sort of to figure it out when you're still early in your career.
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone else has said in terms of being open-minded. Like I said, very first job in Washington, D.C. was actually in the comm space. And then, obviously became intern, moved my way up and moved into the policy space because that's where I felt most comfortable. And I'd say, when you're just starting out, and if you have the luxury of having multiple opportunities and, finances aren't necessarily an issue. I mean, that's when you start to talk to people about what's office culture like. If you have the luxury again of being more picky on that and you're trying to choose between multiple different offers or you're trying to figure out what your next step is, you're going to be spending a lot of time with the people sitting around you. And Capitol Hill is not a place with a lot of office room. You will, on the House side, you've got 5-6 people crammed into one living room. On the Senate side, it's a little bit better. We're a little bit more spacious, but if you're in the Russell office building, you still have 5 or 6 people crammed in one room. It's just the size of a big dining room. So those, if you want to be more choosy, office culture is maybe something you can ask people around, hey, what's this chief of staff like? Hey, what's the kind of office environment here? Is this something that will mesh with me? Because ultimately, right, I think everyone's goal is to be happy where they're working. So those are kind of questions you can ask. And again, so many people, and I've had so many coffees over the years where they come down and they're like, I want to be in LA and work on foreign policy. There's only so many of those roles on Capitol Hill. And frankly, I will say, as someone who used to love foreign policy, I actually really love banking and trade. And if you had asked me 10 years ago if I'd be handling banking and trade issues, I would have said no, because I loved foreign policy. But I love banking and trade issues, and I grew into that and was exposed to it. So, just as you can be on a policy or comm side, you can actually also be in different policy areas. Just being open-minded will allow you to maximize the opportunities that come up.
Great. That's awesome. And I think everything you guys are saying kind of yields the importance that having these conversations and, especially given our new reality, more people more receptive to their inboxes and cold emails and different things like that. So I appreciate all you guys being a part of this conversation. The last question is sort of a wrap-up question, and feel free to share any closing thoughts as well. Is what's one piece of advice that you wish you had kind of coming up when you began your career that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess I can go. I guess just don't be afraid to fail. I think, as we all know, the hill can be sort of cutthroat and brutal, and things don't work out your way. You'll get, there are lots of jobs that I didn't get, but I'm sort of glad I didn't, because I love where I am now and the office I work for now. And so, it's going to be tough. You're going to get rejected sometimes, but in the end, if you keep persevering, you're going to find what you're looking for. But, a job that you didn't get is not the end of the world. There are lots of opportunities on the hill, and if this is something that you want to do, just keep pushing.
Great.
Yeah, I would say a can-do attitude, especially on Capitol Hill. No job is too small. No thing is too big. It has helped me my entire time. Like I think somebody mentioned earlier, being a utility player, because, even if you're the staff assistant to chief of staff, everyone is going to have to do something, because it's about making sure that we're carrying out the mission, which is serving our constituents. And so, I think that's just an important perspective to have if you want a career in Capitol Hill. And, it's helped me in the times where I haven't gotten the job I thought I wanted, or haven't gotten the opportunity, or my bill didn't make it. You just got to get back up and keep going.
And Sonali?
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone has said about persistence. It's the only way you can get anywhere here is to have faith in yourself and be persistent if you know what you want. And I would say the other thing is that I wish I had known is the importance of these kind of loose connections that you have in your life. I think I, significantly undervalued them when I was younger, but it can be, the person that you interned with, or just, like some random person that you met through some, event that you attended. But a lot of times those loose connections that are kind of like your second, third layer of people in your orbit are the ones that can make things happen or connect you to opportunities and things like that. So I think it's really important to make sure you maintain those, keep in touch, send email updates on what you're doing to folks that you think could be helpful to you in the future. And so I would say, and the importance of maintaining those connections.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you to the three of you for all your advice and the perspective you offer. I think just sort of in closing, thank you to APAICS and CAPASSO as well for helping us put this on. I think to get on the points that were just made, I think there is a significant amount of staffers on Capitol Hill that want to help the next generation, be a part of that pipeline, and sort of bring people up as we also climb that ladder on Capitol Hill. So the three people that are hiring managers, senior staffers that I look up to in a lot of ways that have succeeded in their careers are models of that, and models of public service, particularly given the uncertain times we're all kind of talking from our living room. So I appreciate you guys all, and I'll kick it back over to Alex for some closing remarks.
Great, thank you so much. This was definitely a great conversation today, especially in a place of normally holding this in person every summer. I'm glad we're able to move this online. It's always good to learn about other people's journeys to the Hill, kind of why you ended up in the roles you are today, what your motivations are for public service. And so for our audience, I really hope this gave you some insight into pathways to Congress, including maybe what hiring managers are looking for, different ways to get your foot in the door. And I hope you took something away, whether you're just entering the workforce or you're even considering a mid-career switch to public service. And just a little plug, of course, at APAICS, our mission is to increase API representation at all levels. That's why we have programs like our congressional fellowships, internships, webinars like these. We always have something going on. So if you head to our website, we have a couple more coming up, like I think a technical resume best practices session next week, another career exploration panel later this month. But mostly want to just thank starting with Anthony for moderating this discussion today and our continued partnership with CAPASSO to make events like this happen too and to really highlight our AAPI staffers on the Hill. And of course, thank you again to our panelists, Sonali, Lila, and Mike for really just taking the time out of your busy days to speak with us and our audience. And for everybody at home, we'll see you next time.